Hannibal's biography, battles and facts. Hannibal, Carthaginian general, one of the great military leaders of antiquity, who commanded the Carthaginian forces against Rome in the Second Punic War, 201 BCE, and who continued to oppose Rome until his death. He is perhaps best known for his crossing of the Alps to wage war on Rome. Hannibal, born 247 BCE, North Africa, died c. 183-181 BCE, Libissa, Bithynia, near Gebze, Turkey, was a Carthaginian general, one of the great military leaders of antiquity, who commanded the Carthaginian forces against Rome in the Second Punic War, 201 BCE, and who continued to oppose Rome and its satellites until his death. Hannibal was the son of the great Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca. The Greek historian Polybius and the Roman historian Livy are the two primary sources for his life. According to them, Hannibal was taken to Spain by his father, and at an early age was made to swear eternal hostility to Rome. From the death of his father in 229-228 until his own death about 183, Hannibal's life was one of near constant struggle against the Roman Republic. Hannibal's earliest commands were given to him in the Carthaginian province of Spain by Hasdrubal, son-in-law and successor of Hamilcar. It is clear that Hannibal emerged as a successful officer, for on the assassination of Hasdrubal in 221, the army proclaimed him at age 26 its commander-in-chief, and the Carthaginian government quickly ratified his field appointment. Hannibal immediately turned himself to the consolidation of the Punic hold on Spain. He married a Spanish princess, Emilce, and then conquered various Spanish tribes. He fought against the Olcades and captured their capital, Althea, and he quelled the Vacae in the northwest. In 221, making the seaport of Carthage, modern Cartagena, Spain, his base, he won a resounding victory over the Carpetani in the region of the Tagus River. Hannibal's daring strategy against Rome explained. Learn about Hannibal's campaign against Rome, beginning with his attack on Saguntum. In 219, Hannibal attacked Saguntum, an independent Iberian city south of the Ebro River. In the treaty between Rome and Carthage subsequent to the First Punic War, 264-241, the Ebro had been set as the northern limit of Carthaginian influence in the Iberian Peninsula. Saguntum was indeed south of the Ebro, but the Romans had friendship, though perhaps not an actual treaty, with the city and regarded the Carthaginian attack on it as an act of war. The siege of Saguntum lasted 8 months, and in it Hannibal was wounded. The Romans, who had sent envoys to Carthage in protest, though they did not send an army to help Saguntum, after its fall demanded the surrender of Hannibal. Hannibal spent the winter of 219-218 at Cartagena in active preparations for carrying the war into Italy. Leaving his brother Hasdrubal in command of a considerable army for the defense of Spain and North Africa, he crossed the Ebro in April or May 218 and then marched into the Pyrenees. Rome declared war shortly before it heard of his arrival at the Pyrenees, a decision spurred by Saguntum and Hannibal's crossing of the Ebro. Hannibal may have started from Cartagena with an army of around 90,000, including an estimated 12,000 cavalry, but he left at least 20,000 soldiers in Spain to protect his supply lines. In the Pyrenees, his army, which included at least 37 elephants, met with stiff resistance from the Pyrenean tribes. This opposition and the likely desertion of some of his Spanish troops diminished his numbers as he reached the Rhone River, but he met little resistance from the tribes of southern Gaul. Meanwhile, the Roman general Publius Cornelius Scipio transported his army, which had been detained in northern Italy by a rebellion, by sea to the area of Massilia, Marseille, a city that was allied to Rome. Thus, Hannibal's access to the coastal route into Italy was blocked not only by the Massilians, but by at least one army, with another gathering in Italy. As Scipio moved northward along the right bank of the Rhone, he learned that Hannibal had already crossed the river and was marching northward on the left bank. Realizing that Hannibal probably planned to cross the Alps, Scipio returned to northern Italy to await him. Controversy has surrounded the details of Hannibal's movements after the crossing of the Rhone. Polybius states that he crossed it while the river was still in one stream at a distance of 4 days' march from the sea. Fork, opposite Arles, is thought by some to have been the likely crossing place. Many also consider as possibilities the natural historic fording places between modern Beaucaire and Avignon. Hannibal used coracles and boats locally commandeered. For the elephants, he made jetties out into the river and floated the elephants from those on earth-covered rafts. Horses were embarked on large boats or made to swim. During the operation, hostile Gauls appeared on the eastern bank, and Hannibal dispatched a force under Hanno to cross farther upstream and attack them from behind. As the Gauls attempted to block Hannibal's crossing, Hanno's force struck, scattering the Gauls and allowing the main body of the Carthaginian army to transit the Rhone unopposed. Hannibal then received friendly Gallic leaders, headed by the northern Italian Boii, a Celtic tribe whose lands had been reduced by recent Roman settlements and whose superior knowledge of the Alpine passes must have been of the greatest value to Hannibal's plans. Indeed, Polybius makes it clear that Hannibal did not march toward the Alps blindly, but instead had excellent information about the best routes. After crossing the Rhone, Hannibal's army seems to have marched north for about 80 miles, 130 kilometers, and passed into an area called the Island, the identification of which is the key to Hannibal's subsequent movements on land. According to Polybius, it was a fertile, densely populated triangle bounded by hills, by the Rhone, and by a river that is probably the Isère. The confluence of the Rhone and the Isère marked the boundary of the Allobroge tribe, and on the island, a civil war was being fought between two brothers, possibly both Allobroge chieftains. Brancus, the elder, in return for Hannibal's help, provided supplies for the Carthaginian army, which after marching about 750 miles, 1,210 kilometers, in 4 months from Cartagena, was in sore need of them. The Alpine crossing of Hannibal. Hannibal's daring crossing of the Alps is mainly recorded by Polybius, who may have traveled the route himself. Early on, the Allobroges tribe ambushed Hannibal's forces, inflicting heavy losses near modern-day Grenoble. Despite setbacks, Hannibal captured a Gallic town and secured provisions. Days later, another ambush by Gauls led to dangerous rockfalls that panicked men and animals alike. To protect his forces, Hannibal camped on a high rock before navigating the narrow gorge at night. Finally reaching the snowy summit, Hannibal prepared for a challenging descent into Italy, with treacherous conditions, landslides and falling snow. After 15 grueling days, he arrived with 25,000 infantry, 6,000 cavalry, and most of his 37 elephants, overcoming hostile tribes, rugged terrain, and brutal climate. The war in Italy. Hannibal's forces, now outmatched by Scipio's Roman army near the Po River, saw early success when his Numidian cavalry defeated the Romans. Later, Hannibal baited the Romans into battle along the Trebia River, where his victory brought Gauls and Ligurians to his side. After battling through the Arno marshes, he managed to defeat Flaminius's army at Lake Trasimene in a decisive ambush, annihilating the Roman forces. In 216, Hannibal captured the supply depot at Cannae, drawing the Romans into a narrow battlefield. Using a double envelopment tactic, he encircled and decimated the Roman legions, killing tens of thousands. Despite this crushing blow, he didn't march on Rome but instead secured allies in Capua. Over time, Rome's persistence and strategic city defenses shifted Hannibal from offense to defense, while his forces dwindled due to dwindling supplies, limited reinforcements, and Carthaginian inaction. By 211, Capua and other key strongholds had fallen, and Rome's steady counterattacks slowly eroded Hannibal's campaign. The wars in Spain and Africa. Roman successes in Spain weakened Carthage, and in 208, Hannibal's brother Hasdrubal crossed the Alps to reinforce him. However, Hasdrubal was intercepted and defeated at the Battle of Metaurus, where he was killed, and his head was sent to Hannibal, a devastating sign of Carthage's declining fortunes. With his hopes for central Italy dashed, Hannibal retreated to Bruttium, holding off Roman forces for 4 years. In 205, Scipio, newly elected consul, led a campaign against Carthage's allies in North Africa, prompting Hannibal to abandon Italy and return to defend his homeland. Despite an initial armistice, renewed hostilities led to the climactic Battle of Zama. With a cavalry disadvantage and weakened forces, Hannibal faced Scipio's seasoned army bolstered by Numidian cavalry. Hannibal's lines were routed, losing 20,000 men. Though he survived, this marked the end of his military campaigns for Carthage. Exile and death of Hannibal. After the Treaty of Zama, Hannibal's life goal was shattered, yet his desire to fight Rome persisted. Despite opposition from Carthage's elite, he became suffate, implementing reforms and challenging corruption which made him enemies. When accused of inciting Antiochus III of Syria against Rome, Hannibal fled to Antiochus, offering strategic counsel in the ensuing conflict. Sent to command a fleet, he suffered defeat at Side in Pamphylia, and after Antiochus's overall loss, Rome demanded Hannibal's surrender. Hannibal escaped to Bithynia, serving King Prusias in his war against Rome's ally Eumenes II. In one battle, he famously used baskets of snakes as a weapon. Eventually, betrayed and surrounded, he took poison to evade capture by Rome, ending his life around 183 BCE in defiance of his longtime enemy.